Imagine you're a child. Your life is relatively normal. Your parents have been there through all of the important events in your life. Then one day they say, we need to talk, and they tell you they're getting a divorce. You're a little surprised, but you're okay with this because you've got friends whose parents divorced. They're doing just fine, so you figure you can adjust as well. Then you say the first thing that comes to your mind. Why? Your mom gently leans over and says, because I'm going to be a man. How do you process that information? Do you process this information? You've never met anybody like this before, and odds are you may not have even heard about anything like this before. Marcia Llewellyn Roettgen was born December 31st, 1947 in Missouri. She was a pretty little girl, but she was really not very happy at all. The topic of trans issue was still fairly new. With being in a German Lutheran conservative home, they just didn't talk about these things. If there was any discussion of trans issues, it was Christine Jorgensen becoming the face in about 1951, 52. But it was still very negative and misunderstood when it was discussed. She had left home, and in about 1965, she had a son. In 1968, she had another son. And then in 1972, she had me. I was the only girl. There was no major discussion, no scenario of parents divorcing and making this big announcement about being a trans person. It just was, as they say, what it was. Now, children come from a variety of backgrounds. They have to endure abuse, poverty, illness, divorce, death, you name it. They have to deal with a whole number of challenges. But fortunately, there's a great number of resources available for these children to face these challenges. With teachers, clergy, counselors, friends, and now online resources, children can find any kind of assistance they need for nearly every challenge they face, except for one. What do I do if my parent is trans? It's not like I can just walk up to somebody and say, my mom was a girl and now is a boy, because that's not going to go over very well. Having watched the transition from Bruce to Caitlin, I've noticed that the acceptance for trans issues is still really not there. Children are hearing the negative and often hateful comments being made about this, and they internalize that. And they want to hide because they don't want people to know that little secret that's in their life. Before I move on, I want to discuss a couple of definitions so that we have an idea of what I'm talking about. You may have heard the term cisgender. I am cisgender. When I was born, the doctor said, it's a girl. And so my body, my mind, my soul all identify as female, therefore I am cisgender. Transgender is somebody whose mind, body, and soul do not necessarily align. When I'm talking about trans in this respect, I'm talking about a transsexual. A transsexual was assigned one gender and identifies as the opposite. My mother was born female and identified as male. Approximately 1 in 30,000 assigned males will transition to female, and about 1 in 100,000 assigned females will transition to males. A transsexual seeks to or has socially transitioned. This is all a socially constructed idea of how we present gender. So why does any of this matter? Children with trans parents are growing up trying to understand their own identity at the same time as trying to understand their parents' identity. This is very complicated. Therefore, these children could use a little support through this process. It's important to understand how these children feel, the questions they may ask, and what resources are available. I don't claim to understand all of the feelings that people feel as a child of a trans parent. I can tell you how I feel or felt, and I can tell you what other people have discussed about how they felt. One of the main feelings would likely be confusion. Young children, very young, can tell you that's a boy and that's a girl, but they don't understand much beyond that. As children grow, they understand more, and once they reach adolescence, they start to understand the identity part of gender. You know, it's a boy is a boy, shaving, spiked hair, whatever. But this can be very confusing because they're understanding what this means, but their parent just is kind of all over the place and they don't know where to go from there. Because this is something that we don't normally talk about as a child of a trans parent, we tend to feel isolated, and as a result, we have a struggle fitting in. We make connections to each other by sharing like experiences, talking about events that take part in our lives, and connecting with people that are like us. But because we don't talk about this or much of anything else as it relates to our family, we tend to disconnect from others and become very, very isolated. Finally, because of the dynamic of the family, there may be feelings of inferiority. First of all, my family is different than everybody else's, so it must be wrong, which means inferior. Also, even within the family, you can feel inferior. My mother did not identify as female, identified as male, had 2 sons. They were preferred. Then I was born. At that point was when my mother decided to transition. So therefore, I figured there was something inferior with gender, female, therefore inferior with me. So beyond feelings, I'm sure it kind of goes without saying that there's going to be a lot of questions that come about. And this is really important to understand because children, as children do, will just ask questions about everything. When it comes to this topic, they may come up with questions that we haven't even thought of, but I want to address just a couple of them. One main question is, if my parent is trans, will I be trans as well? The obvious question here is no. There is nothing, no data at all to indicate that if you have a trans parent, you will be trans. This is usually followed by, well, if my parent is trans, will I be gay? There again is no connection between having a trans parent and being gay, and being trans and being gay are 2 completely different things. Being trans is gender identity, being gay is who you're attracted to. Being transsexual is how I see myself. Being gay is how I see others. So it's important that that distinction is made. There's also a question is, will my relationship with my trans parent change? Well, yes, this relationship is going to change in a big way. But it doesn't mean that the relationship is going to disappear. If you play ball with your dad in the backyard every Saturday afternoon, she's going to do it with you as well, even when she changes to female. And if you cook brunch every Sunday morning with your mom, probably going to be doing the same thing when he transitions. While the relationship will change, it's still there. What do I call my mother or father now? Again, no simple answer. This is one of those things where you've got to talk to each other. You as a family will discuss how you're going to handle this. I called my mother Marty. That was the name that was chosen, and that's the name that I called. My brother, however, used dad. I was not okay with dad because that was not my dad. It worked for my brother, not my thing. The only thing that really mattered to Marty was that I used the correct pronoun, he. Then we can go on to the subject of surgery. Not all trans people will have surgery. Some may just have breasts removed or shaving of the Adam's apple. Other trans people will have surgery that will make the entire body match the gender identity. Children will have anxiety about this because with surgery comes, the risk of death. With advances, the risk of death has been minimized, but that risk is still there. Children will also be very confused about what this means. What does this make my parent now? This is where you need to ask questions. It's a lot of dialogue. There is no one right answer for this, but it's important to recognize that asking questions will make a huge difference. So what do we need? We need a lot of things. Children of trans are living in a very, very strange, uncharted territory, so we could use a lot of stuff. We need to know that it's okay. We need to know it's okay to feel. We need to know it's okay to ask questions. We need to know it's okay to feel anything and do anything that we need to do to understand what's going on. As a child of a trans parent, I was torn between trying to feel the things that I felt and respect the feelings that Marty had. This is really difficult to do for an adult. This is even more challenging because children are just not equipped for this. Another thing that people don't realize is that having a trans parent is like enduring a loss of sorts. As such, it's not uncommon to go through the stages of grief. The Kubler-Ross model has 5 stages of grief. I look at 7 stages, which seems to be more efficient in this stage. Denial is the first one. It's not happening, everything's fine, everything's gonna be okay eventually, no big deal. We all go through this through life. Changes in life are uncomfortable. So whenever we face a change, we'll go, nope, not happening, all good. And that's just the way we handle life. I didn't go through denial, I just pretended it wasn't there. It just was, it wasn't so much a denial actively, it was just I didn't even pay attention. And depending on the age of a child, they may try to deny that this is happening and accept whatever normal is. We don't really know, but they want things to be normal. And adult children will cling to this exact same hope. The second stage is pain or guilt. I was more on the guilt side. My mother did not identify as female, preferred male. I had 2 brothers, they were favored, I was female. I spurred this change, therefore it's all my fault. I did outgrow this. This was part of my own transition during my mother's transition. The next stage is anger. If my mother knew that she was gonna go through this, why did she have kids? Why did she put us through this? It's okay to be angry. It's okay to express that anger. It's even okay to tell the parent you are angry. It's important to express that because that's the only way you can work through it. The next stage is bargaining, and this is kind of my favorite stage. What can I do to fix this? Many people who know me know that I'm a fixer. I will do whatever I can to fix everything. And children, particularly adolescents, need that balance and structure. And they will do whatever they can to fix it. They can't fix it because there's nothing broken, but they will do the best they can in the process. The next stage is depression. This is really significant because a major change, often over a short period of time, can lead to some pretty gnarly depression. If we're paying attention, and if empathetically addressed, we can minimize this. But because we don't talk about this as a child of a trans parent, we aren't talking about it, it can be missed, which can lead to major issues, including feelings of desperation, and then potentially dangerous and self-destructive behavior. This is where mental health services are vital. Most people, I started this story with the child who's dealing with a divorced family. Most people will go to that child and address the divorce issue, but they won't address the issue that led to the divorce to begin with, which is as traumatic, if not more so, than the divorce itself. In the 6th stage, before we reach number 7, acceptance, it's reconstruction. Because we are changing identities, this is all a big, huge reconstruction. For me, this period lasted, well, pretty much until forever, because I'm learning who I am in relation to Marty. When my daughter was born, I was doing okay. My daughter was born at 21, I'm doing all right. Then my daughter's born, suddenly everything changes. My daughter grew up knowing Marty was my mom and male, which in most circles is completely separate. But it was okay with my daughter because that's all my daughter knew. My daughter chose the name Grand Marty, which totally worked. Everybody was happy with that. And there was no issue of that relationship. It built itself, all was well with the world, but then I had to reconstruct a relationship because now there's a grandchild and everybody changes position in a relationship. And relationships between a parent and a child naturally reconstruct through time. As we grow, we change, parents change, roles change, responsibilities change. So through growing up, this reconstruction constantly takes place. Now that we have gone through all of these stages, or maybe some of us are still trying to muddle through some of those, as a child of a trans parent, it's important to have some support. And we need to know exactly what resources are available to children with a trans parent. One that's really impressive that just came about a couple years ago is the Kids of Trans Resource Guide. Monica Canfield-Lindfest has created this KOT resource guide after her father transitioned in the late 90s. This was created so that she and I would have some sort of reference to understand what we were going through. In the local community, There is Riverside, the Palm Springs Center has mental health services to help children who are trying to muddle through this transition. And the center in Orange County provides resources for family, friends, allies to understand how to live this life, either support a trans person or to support each other, which is important for me because I, at the age of 43, have yet to meet even one person face-to-face who has a trans parent. So by having these resources available, it lets people know that there are others out there and it allows for a connection. Finally, as my story continues, in August 6, 2005, my Marty passed away. This was interesting because the coroner called me in a state of confusion. I tried to make it as easy as possible for the poor intern who was forced to make that phone call, because while Marty had a legal name change, birth certificate change, gender change, ID change, everything in the world was changed to male, the genitals didn't match. And the coroner didn't know what to do with that. So they kind of tripped over themselves on the phone trying to say things to me, not knowing how much I know without divulging too much. It was quite a conversation. And it was very funny. To this day, it's probably one of my favorite moments with Marty. But it made me realize that I may not have known everything that was going on with Marty. And even after death, these challenges still occurred. I still had questions. Had I had the resources as a child, I may not have had so many questions at that time and now. So for now, what I can be is a resource to others, because this is not an issue that's going to go away. And I can now stand here with some answers and be a resource to children with a transgender parent and let them know that they are not alone. Thank you.